Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom and welcome back to today's Daf Hayomi, Nedarim Daf Yotes. We begin right after the Mishnah on Yud Chesam and Beis. So in the Mishnah we learned, Stam Nedarim Lahachmer. If a fellow expresses himself in a lashon which can lend to two possible interpretations. On the one hand, it can be a reference to Davar HaNadar. For instance, he says, Harei like a basar maliach. This meat should be upon me like basar maliach. Well, basar maliach can be a reference to basar kachim, which is salted. Davar HaNadar, created by man, and can be used as a basis for a further neder. Or perhaps, basar maliach is basar favodah zara, which is not a davar nadar, which cannot be used to form a basis for a neder going forward. Which way do we interpret? The Mishnah says, we go l'chumra. Stam nedarim lahachmer. The Rosh explained. The reason is, hanoider dato le'eser. Stam, of a person making a neder, is presumed to be trying to do something. He's trying to accomplish. Mideloi shasak. The very fact that he's not in silent mode, he's speaking, he's saying, indicates he's trying to do, he's trying to create, to accomplish. Apparently he's trying to make a neder, and therefore we interpret it in that fashion. Asks the Gemara 7 lines from the bottom. Really? We go to Chumrah when it comes to Nedarim? V'atanan, we have a Mishnah in Maseches Taharis. Safek Nizirus Lahakal. A fellow expressed himself as follows. He sees somebody walking towards him. He says, if this person is Reuven, I am committing right now to becoming a Nazir. Now that fellow turned around, disappeared. We'll never know who he was. So identity remains unknown. It's a safek. Are you chayiv to keep your Nazirus? Safek Nazirus Lahakel. Now, if in our Mishnah we learned, Stam Nedarim Lahachmir, why is this different? As the Ran explains, Nazirus al yidei nederu. Nazirus is generated by this undertaking, this neder commitment. If Stam Nedarim Lahachmir, why is Stam Nazirus Lahakel? Why is Safek Nazirus Lahakel? Amar Abzera. The answer is, well, our Mishnah reflects Shitas Rabbanon, and that Mishnah reflects Shitas Reliezer. Two different opinions. Amar Abzera lekasha, har Rabbi Eliezer, har Rabbanon. Where do we find these two Shitas? The Sanya. Hamagdash chayasor behemta. A fellow gets up and says, all my animals, my chayos, are committed to the Beis HaMikdash, Hegdish. Or he says, all my behemoths are becoming Hegdish. Now he happens to have this unusual creature called a koi, which is a chaya behema hybrid. So it's not classified as a vadai behema or a vadai chaya. Is that included? Yes. Higdish is a koi. This koi is included on account of uncertainty. So when he commits behema, it includes the koi as well. Or when he commits chaya, it includes the safek as well. That's a Rabbanon, which corresponds to our Mishnah. Stam Nedarim Lahachmer. A person is even willing to commit himself when things are uncertain. Rabbi Eliezer Omer lo yihigdish esakoi. No, don't include the animal, because it's a safek. And this is in line with safek Nazirus Lahakel. When it's a situation of uncertainty, you are not committed. Explains the Gemara. Man da amar mamayna ma'ayel esfeka. According to Rabbanan, who hold that the koi is included. So in terms of committing your possessions to Hegdish, you are willing to allow yourself to commit, even though it's a state of uncertainty. Gufei nami ma'ayel. Likewise, when it comes to personal commitments, like Nedarim, like Nazirus, you are willing to commit yourself, even though it's not really clear that you are committed. No, everything is included. I am magdish. I am committing with a generous heart. Include everything that can be included. So that's Shitas Rabbanon. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer holds, no. What I said, fine. But otherwise, don't create confusion and sfekos. Uman da amar mamayna ayel sfeka. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer says, in terms of possessions, you don't commit on account of uncertainty. Gufei nami koshken blame ayel sfeka. Certainly when it comes to personal obligations like Nedarim and Nazirus, if it's a safek, I'm not committed. Amalei Abaye. But mayu kimta l'safek Nazirus lahakal. So how are you interpreting the Mishnah of Safek Nazirus Lahakel? Whose sheet is it? Rabbi Eliezer, right? Amos Sefer. Let's move on to the second halacha in that same Mishnah, which seems to indicate otherwise. Safek b'chayres. So suppose there's a suffix whether this thing is a firstborn. Echad b'chayri adam, whether firstborn baby. V'echad b'chayri behema, whether the animal firstborn, whether bein tmeya, bein tahira, whether it's a non-kosher animal, whether it's a kosher animal. So by the tmeya, it's referring to the the firstborn donkey, which needs to be addressed through the peter chamor, or b'chayri behema tmeya, a tahira, which is a kosher, a firstborn, which belongs to the kohen. Or when it comes to the b'chayri adam, your first son, which needs to go through the pidin haben. If there's a suffix, the Ran says, let's say, we're not sure which one was born first, the nekeva or the zachar. So there's a suffix whether he is considered firstborn. What is the halacha? Are you obligated? No. The kohen who's trying to collect and claim from you, he has to prove his case. Otherwise, you are exempt. But, V'tani Allah, we have a brisa which explains, V'asurin begiz of avodah. Although, when it comes to the monetary aspect, you don't have to pay unless he can prove his case. V'asurim begiz of avodah. When it comes to the isur aspect of this animal, you cannot shear it or work with it. We have to treat it like a bechor. So apparently, even when it's a suffix kadosh, we go l'chumra. And this is the second part of that halacha of suffix naziris lahakal. We go l'kula. Amalei. So Reb Zera says, what's the correlation? Maikum medamas. How could you compare the two things? Kedusha abba me'ela. A bechor is not man-made; it's a natural kedusha. The kedusha abba b'dei adam, to something which is man-made like naziris. I don't initiate a situation which creates confusion. But when it's naturally occurring kedusha, and there's a suffix whether it occurred or not, that's not up to me. In that case, we have to go l'chumra to take into account all possibilities. And really, the Rashba says this was a rather simple answer to the question, but it was mainly meant for the next question. It was sort of a lead up to the next question, which is actually also halacha mentioned in that Mishnah. The Gemara will quote from a brisa, but it's really also the halacha in that same Mishnah. So we led into that halacha. Elei kasha. Rather, if there's any kasha in our discussion, hakasha, it's as follows. Safek mashkin li tame tame. A fellow who's tame extends his hand amongst liquids. We don't know whether he touched or not. There's a suffix whether that mashkin received tuma. Suffix mashkin li tame, on the receiving end. Tame, we treat it as tame, we go l'chumra. Li tame acherim toyer. The suffix is whether the liquid, which is tame, transmitted tuma to something else. That's only Medrabanan. If there's any suffix, we go l'kula, we say it's toyer. Divrei Rabbi Meir. V'chein haya, Rabbi Lezer concurred with that shita. So clearly, Rabbi Lezer holds that when it comes to a suffix tuma of mashkin, which is the Rabbanan, such as the question whether it transmitted tuma, we go l'kula. The question is, if the suffix pertains to whether the mashkin became tamei, why do we say a suffix is tamei? As we're going to prove in a minute, Reb Lezer holds the entire concept of mashkin associating with tuma is only with the Rabbanan. In Torah, only food and vessels can become tamei, not mashkin. In which case, any sort of situation involving mashkin and tuma is only with the Rabbanan. So why would you say suffix mashkin li tamei is tamei? The question whether it became tamei renders it tamei. Why? It's suffix l'kula. And the Gemara is sort of making a connection here, because if we say that when it comes to a hegdesh, a person is not willing, or not including a suffix, he doesn't want to get involved in confusion and uncertainties, right? So when it comes to the takanas chachamim, that mashkin should become tamei, presumably they also did not apply to situations of suffix. So why would you say, if there's a suffix, whether the mashkin became tamei, and of course it's only the Rabbana, as we're going to prove in a minute, why would they say it's tamei? Umi svili l'Reb Lezer li tamei tamei. How do we explain that according to Rabbi Lezer, if the suffix is whether the mashkin became tummy, you consider it tummy vatanya. We have a brisa that according to Rabbi Lezer, it's all midrabanan. So why would you apply tumah midrabanan if it's only a suffix? Rabbi Lezer Omer ain't tumah lemashkin kol ikar. Min HaTorah, there's no tumah to mashkin at all. Nothing. Not to give tumah, not to accept tumah. Teida, I'll prove it to you. I'll prove that there is no tumah to mashkin min HaTorah. Sharei Heyed Yosei ben Yezer ish treda. So this the Chacham testified as follows: 2 halachas. Number 1, al ayel. That's the type of kamta, type of grasshopper. Dochin, it's tar, meaning it's mutter lachila. That's number 1. Doesn't really relate to us. The second halacha relates to us. V'al mashkin beis mitbachaya dochin. All liquids found in the makam hamitbachayim, where they dissect the karbanos, they do the shchita, and the Beis Hamikdash. All liquids found there are considered tar, and the Ran explains because tumas mashkin is d'Rabbanan, and they wanted to minimize any prevalence of tumah in the Beis Hamikdash. Now, of course, this only works if tumas mashkin is d'Rabbanan. Ha nich l'shmuel. Now, I wouldn't have a kasha if I would follow Shmuel's interpretation of this halacha. The Amar, he explained, when we speak about the waters in the Beis Hamikdash being tar, dochin milatam acherim, it's tar from transmitting tumah to others, because the ability of mashkin to transmit tumah is only d'Rabbanan, and that was suspended in the Mikdash. Aval tumas atzmon yesh behen, but certainly, even liquids found in the Beis Hamikdash can contain their own tumah, because receiving tumah is min HaTorah, even by mashkin, and that could not have been suspended even in the Beis Hamikdash. Shaper. So according to this interpretation, I wouldn't have any kasha. As per Rabbi Lezer, considering mashkin, which had a suffix, whether they became tummy to be tummy, because that's the rice, I can't tinker with that. Elo l'Rav de Amar dochin mamish. According to Rav's interpretation of this halacha, that any mashkin in the Beis Hamikdash was completely, totally, absolutely toyer, whether to give to others, whether to accept tumah for themselves. Apparently, it's because the concept of mashkin tmein is mili midrabanan. If that's the case, Michael Amema, why would Rabbi Lezer say that when there's a suffix, whether the mashkin received tumah, which is only midrabanan, you consider it tummy? And again, this sort of contradicts the idea that Rabbi Lezer holds suffix nizirus lahakal. Right? As Ran explains, what's the connection between suffix tumah, l'chumra, and suffix nizirus? So he says there is a deficiency on both sides of the equation. So we're comparing suffix nizirus to suffix tumah. And the rationale will be like this. If you tell me that suffix nizirus, where a person initiated it, true, it's man-made. And therefore, the assumption is, loy ma'ayel nafshei lasfek, a person would not allow himself to get involved in a situation of uncertainty. I don't want confusion, I don't want, mayhem. If it's clear, fine, but otherwise, leave it out. And that would be Shittas Rabbi Lezer. Likewise, when it comes to the Chachamim enacting a takana, such as the ability of mashka to become tamei, they would only address situations which are certain and absolute. But a suffix mashkin litami, it's a suffix, presumably they wouldn't include it in the gzera. So we have a flat-out contradiction. If Rabbi Lezer indeed holds confusion, uncertainty is not included in a person's nzirus, why would it be included in the takanas chachamim of suffix mashkin? So we have to fall away from that pshat. Apparently, Rabbi Lezer will apply tumah even if it's a suffix. We do address even sfeikas. What about the Mishnah, which says suffix nizirus lahakal? That's not Rabbi Lezer. That's a different sheet. Ella, rather, we're going to say as follows: Ha Rabbi Yehuda, v'ha Rabbi Shimon. The Tana which says no suffix nizirus, that's Rabbi Yehuda's shita. A person is not availing himself to uncertainties, whereas the other shita, meaning our Mishnah, which says stam nedarim lahachmir, we do include sveikas. That's Rabbi Shimon. The Sanya. Hareni nazir yesh b'kriya zeh A fellow declares, I am becoming a nazir if I find 100 kur, 100 measures of wheat in this kri, in this pile. V'halach umatzah shenigna v'shavet. He approaches the kri, it's gone, lost or stolen. He'll never find out how much there was. Is he a Nazir? Rabbi Yehuda Matter. He says, no, he's not a Nazir. It's a suffix. He did not avail himself to Sfeikos. And this corresponds with the Mishnah, which we had before, suffix Naziris Lahakel. Rabbi Shimon Eised. According to Rabbi Shimon, we go L'chumra. As we explained before, Stam Nedarim Lahachmer, Stam Naziris Lahachmer, you're trying to accomplish, you're trying to do something, you're accepting it upon yourself, regardless. So, this is attempt number 2 at answering the kasha between our Mishnah, which says Stam Nedarim Lahachmer, and the Mishnah, which says Suffix Naziris Lahakel. The answer is, our Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon, who goes L'chumra by Naziris and by Nedarim. The other Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. As we just saw, he goes L'kula by a Suffix Naziris. And presumably our Mishnah, which says Suffix Nedarim Lahachmer, is not Rabbi Yehuda. What do you mean? Rabbi Yehuda himself is mentioned in our Mishnah. That Suffix Nedarim Lahachmer. V'ramid Rabbi Yehuda, ad Rabbi Yehuda, we're going to have a flat-out contradiction between two Rabbi Yehudas. Mi am Rabbi Yehuda, lo yima'ayel inish nafshi l'sveika. Can you suggest that according to Rabbi Yehuda, a person is not availing himself to situations of uncertainty? He's not including that in his commitment. V'ramini, we have a kasha from our Mishnah right here, where Rabbi Yehuda's name himself is mentioned. Where? Rabbi Yehuda, when it comes to the lashon teruma, which can lend to 2 interpretations. So this will be like truma. If truma is trumas halishka, the machzas hashekel coins, which are davar hanodar, then sure, it serves as basis for further nedarim. Truma can also be referring to trumas hakri, grain taken off the granary. That's not called davar hanodar. So we go l'chumra. But Rabbi Yehuda says it's all location based. It depends on your familiarity with that specific aspect of truma. Rabbi Yehuda, stam truma b'Yehuda asura. If you live close to the Beis Hamikdash in Yehuda territory, when you say truma, it's presumed to be a reference to trumas halishka, which generates a neder. Ubegolul muteris. However, if you reside out there in Golul, the lashon truma is not at all a reference to trumas halishka. She'en ganshe agolul makirin as trumas halishka. People out there are not familiar at all with this concept of trumas halishka. When they say truma, it's regular truma, which is not davar another. So that's why they're off the hook, because they have no reference to truma as halishka. Time odein makir. Let's make a diak. It's not considered davar hanadar because they're totally unfamiliar with trumas halishka. So when they speak truma, it's trumas goyren, not a davar hanadar. Let's make a diak. Ha makirin. Suppose they have some slight familiarity with trumas halishka. So now their word can mean either or. It can lend to 2 possibilities. It has both options. Either this truma, which is davar hanadar, or that which isn't. Asur, we say that their expression creates a neder. Why? Because stam nedarim lahachmer. Apparently, even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that's stam nedarim lahachmer. And this seems to be totally inconsistent with Rabbi Yehuda, who says that he's makabel nazir if there's a certain amount, and then it's unverifiable. He's not a nazir. Why? Stam nedarim and stam naziris lahachmer. Amar Rava. He says, look, typically Rabbi Yehuda would agree, stam nedarim lahachmer, but by naziris it's different. So sure, our Mishnah, which says stam nedarim lahachmer, that could be Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. But when it comes to naziris, Rabbi Yehuda holds a person would not avail himself to a suffix naziris. You know why? It's going to create a situation which is even more severe than a definite naziris. When you have a suffix naziris, you're up against so many complications, and therefore, when the Mishnah says "Stam suffix naziris lahakel," that's Rabbi Yehuda speaking that a suffix naziris is totally not on his radar. Rav explains why. Amar Rav Gabi Kri, when it was that suffix, he's committed to be a nazir, assuming there was 100, kur in the Kri, and then it turned out to be, an unknown value. Rabbi Kri kasavar kosha sveika chomer vadoy, loy ma'ayel nafshi l'sveika. whenever a possible suffix Nazirus creates a situation which is more severe, more strict, and more confusing than a Vada Nazirus, a person will not do that. I'm willing to accept upon myself a regular Nazirus. Right? I know I can handle that. But a suffix Nazirus, that's way worse, way more complicated. I'm not going to do that. In which way is it more complicated? Very simple. The ilugabi Nazir Vadai. Because if he's a regular Nazir, Megaleach may be carved after 30 days. You bring your carbonis, your chatas, etc., and you shave and you're done. V'nechal, and you eat the carbonis. But when there's a suffix, remember, you can't bring a carbon chatas if you don't even know you're a Nazir. You can't shave because you can't bring the carbon. So a person's not willing to enter that type of commitment. And that's Rabbi Yehuda's shita. Apparently Rabbi Shimon disagrees. He's so generous, he's willing to allow himself anything. I have a question to you, Rabbi. You've addressed a regular standard Nazirus. So if it's a suffix, you can't you can't release yourself after 30 days. But let's say let's say he committed himself to a lifetime Nazirus. There's such a type of Nazirus, a lifetime Nazirus, where he's not going to shave after 30 days in any case. So what's the difference? Why wouldn't he be committed when it's a suffix? Amalei, he says, no. There as well, there's a difference. Nazir Olam Nami Sveike Chamer Mevadai. Even by Nazir Olam, when it's a suffix, in a way it's more severe than a Vadai. Why? Because even by Nazir Olam, there's an option of trimming your hair. The Ilu Vadai, because if he knows with certainty that he's a Nazir Olam, you can trim your hair occasionally. Hichbet Sari, we know the hair gets too heavy. Mekel Batar, you can take a razor and do a little trim. Or maybe Shalish Bemis, provided he brings the carbonis. But when it's a suffix, like in our case, it won't work because he can't bring carbonis. So there's a chomer there as well, and therefore he's not allowing himself to that. Omar, what about if he said already Nazir Shimshin Mai? He committed himself to being a Nazir like Shimshin, in which case there's no trimming whatsoever. So once this option is not available, so there's no chumrah to a suffix. Omar, he says you're right. Nazir Shimshin Leitanya, in fact, there's no discussion about this type of Nazir. In fact, if he committed himself to being a Nazir Shimshin, it would apply even by suffix. Leitanya. Omar Leisi, he responded, well, V'Amar V'Ada Bar Avo Tanya Nazir Shimshin. We have a brisa which makes direct mention of Nazir Shimshin, and even there, Rabbi Yehuda is not going to activate Nazirus. That's a problem according to your upshot, because what's the downside to a suffix over a vadi? In any case, there's no trimming option. Amalei Tanya. Okay, if there's a brisa, I pick my hands up. I have no response. Perhaps it's another version of Rabbi Yehuda, but according to our version, it only applies to situations where the suffix creates a greater concern than the vada. So according to this approach, we have another answer to the kasha. In our Mishnah, we speak about Nedarim lahachmer. That's Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Shimon. But when it comes to the Mishnah of Safak Nazirus Lakal, that is Shita Rabbi Yehuda, who says a person knows what he can handle. A Vada Nazir is okay, but if it's a suffix which will inevitably lead to confusion, he's not willing to allow himself to accept that. Rav Ashi Amar, here comes approach number 4. Hahi Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Tarfani. Generally speaking, even Rabbi Yehuda agrees when it comes to a suffix, Nedarim, Yomachmer. You're trying to accomplish, you're trying to do, we go l'chumrah. Why then do we say Stam Nazirus, suffix Nazirus Lahakal? Because there's a special shita called Shita Rabbi Tarfon. And Rabbi Yehuda is quoting Rabbi Tarfon. Ahi, Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Tarfoni. That halacha, that suffix, Nazirus Lakula, is Rabbi Yehuda the name of Rabbi Tarfon the Sanya. Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Tarfon Oimer. So the situation was like this. Two people are taking a walk, and they see a person walking towards them. So we have Reuven and Shimon, and there's a stranger walking towards them, at this point unidentified. Reuven says, look, I am committing to being a Nazir if this fellow is Reuven. And Shimon says, I'm going to be a Nazir if he's not Reuven. So you would assume one of them is a Nazir. Rabbi Tarfon disagrees. Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Tarfon Oimer, Ein echad behem Nazir. None of them are committed. You know why? Because it wasn't explicit. The pasuk says, Ish ki yafli. Yafli means a clear expression. It has to be explicit. It has to be clear and apparent at the point of expression. And in this case, when they said what they said, was it clear? No. It had to be verified later and confirmed later. That can't activate Nazirus. Ein echad mehem nazir if l'shalei nitna Nazirus ella flaw. You need to have flaw. And that's the reason why Rabbi Yehuda says, Safek Nazirus lahakal. It's a local word. It's a specific halacha for Nazirus. So that explains this halacha where he said, I'm going to be a Nazir if there's 100 measures of wheat in this kri, and they come back and it's gone. There's no way to confirm the amount. Rabbi Yehuda says, no Nazirus, because when he expressed his commitment, was it clear? Was it absolute? No. Whereas Rabbi Shimon says, even in this case, it's committal. Asks the Gemara, if that's the rationale, the hafla requirement is what deactivates the Nazirus, why discuss a case where it's lost or stolen? Even if it wasn't, even if it's right here. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it doesn't work. Because at the point of commitment, it wasn't clear. Says the Gemara, you're right. That element is not really necessary for the halacha. The point is to highlight Rabbi Shimon's shita. That even if there's no way to find out how much there was, it's stolen, it's lost. Because Sabar, he insists, ma'ayel inish nafshi l'sfeka. A person is willing to allow himself, is willing to commit himself, even in a situation of uncertainty. So the Ran points out, we have two chidushim. Firstly, we don't need hafla, we don't need clarity. Number two, even if it never gets confirmed, never gets verified, it stays a perpetual suffix, he's committed. Okay, so let's just summarize quickly. We had a Mishnah, Stam Nedarim Lahachmer. We had a Mishnah which says suffix Nazirus Lahakal. We seem to have a contradiction. So first we said, well, Rabbi Lezer holds Lekula. Really? So why by the Mashkin do we include the suffix as well? So now we said, you know what? Rabbi Lezer is not the one that's makel by the suffix Nazirus. Maybe only by the koi, by the koi. The Ran explained because koi is not, classified as behem or chayus. That's not included in his expression. But generally speaking, even sfekas are included. So pshat number 2 was that it's Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Our Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon, whereas Rabbi Yehuda says suffix nazir is the kula. We had a kash on that. Rabbi Yehuda himself and our Mishnah says nedarim lahachma. So we said another pshat that it's dafka by nazirus, where the suffix generates more concern than avada, it makes it more complicated. Rabbi Yehuda is not willing to accept that. Then we said, what do you mean by nazir shimshon? There are no adverse ramifications to suffix. So the final pshat was that there's a din hafla, which is specific and unique to Nazirus. Any uncertainty in terms of his expression and intention rules out the Nazirus commitment. So that explains the halacha why Nazirus lahaka. Whereas by Nedarim we go lahachmer. Nedarim doesn't have that requirement. Okay, and the last segment of the Mishnah, we addressed two possible expressions. How do we interpret teruma? Right? It can either be terumas halishka, which is davar hanadar, or terumas goyren, which is not davar hanadar. We discussed the word charamim, either a reference to chermei kehanim, the gift to the kehanim, which is not davar hanadar, or chermei gavaya, like the hegdish, which is davar hanadar. So Rabbi Yehuda says, it depends where you live. Stam truma. So perhaps for added clarity, it might be worth to go back to the Mishnah. So Rabbi Yehuda says there, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Stam truma, about 2/3 into the Mishnah, Stam truma b'Yehuda asura. When you say truma in Yehuda, it's presumed to be a reference to trumas halishka. But if you're out in Galil, it's okay, because in Galil they don't, they're not familiar with this concept. They're referring to truma of your farm, which is not your another. Asks the Gemara, Ha makir asurin. So in Galil you're safe because they're totally unfamiliar. But let's say they are slightly familiar. So then the Lashon Truma in Gadol can lend to two interpretations, either this or that. What do we say? L'chumra. Almas fake l'chumra. Clearly, Rabbi Yehuda holds there's an equal suffix, an equal balance as to what you meant. We go l'chumra. Ema seifa. Let's take a look at the next halach. So again, let's take a look back at the Mishnah. The final halach is Stam Charamim, Yehuda Mutarin. The Lashon Charamim, Lashon Cherem, and Yehuda is okay because they associated with the Kehanim who were nearby, and it's a reference to the gift to the Kehanim. It's not davar hanadar. But in Galil, it's Asr because the people in Galil do not know about the Charmi Kehanim. And therefore it's Asr because in their minds, Cherem means Cherem to Beis HaMikdash. Okay? So now we're going to have a diuk in the reverse. Ema Seifa, says the Gemara. Stam Charam and Yehuda Mutar. In Yehuda, the Lashon Cherem is okay. Why? Because it's a reference to Cherem Kehanim. That's not davar another. Ubegol Asr, but out in Gol it's no good. She'ein Anshe HaGolil Makirin is Cherem Kehanim. Because in Golil, they're totally unfamiliar with Cherem Kehanim, which would make it mutter. No. In their minds, Cherem is Cherem Gavaya, Cherem to Hegdish. That's davar hanadar. Right? So it sounds like the only reason why it's Asr is because in their minds, Cherem is an absolute reference to something which is nadar. Ha-makirin, apparently if they should have any familiarity with the other interpretation, that Cherem perhaps is a reference to Cherem Kehanim, which is mutter. So now you have an equal equation. It could mean either this or that. What would you say? Lekula. It's mutar. Almas feke lekula. Apparently when there's a suffix, as to your intention, you go lekula. And a minute ago we said the other way around. A suffix is lechumra. Amar Abaye, you're right. You're totally right in your inference. We have two shittas. The first halacha, which indicated that suffix is asr. That's Rabbi Yehuda's shita. And therefore he said that the Lashon Truma in Yehuda is asr, because it can either mean this or that. In Galil, it's mutter because there's absolutely no reference to Truma Salishka there. You have to be totally free and clear from that option. Because otherwise, if it can theoretically lend to two interpretations, it will be asr. That's Rabbi Yehuda's shita. Stam Nedarim lahachmir. Amar Abaye is safer, but the second part, which indicates otherwise. Lashon Cherem in Yehuda is mutter because it's a reference to the Kehanim as well. Whereas in Galil it's totally asr because it's only a reference to the Cherem of the Beis HaMikdash. They have no notion, no inkling as to Cherem of the Kehanim. So in their minds, Cherem means Beis HaMikdash. This indicates to us that if there's a suffix, it would be okay. Seifa, Rab Lezer, Rab Tzadiki, that's the other shita, the Sandi, Rabbi Yehuda, Stam Truma Yehuda Asura. Rabbi Yehuda says in Yehuda, Stam Truma is Asur because it's an equal, an option. You can lend to either this or that, so it's suffix l'chumra. Rab Lezer, Rab Tzadik, Omer, Stam Charamim Begol Asur. He says that the Stam Cherem in Gol is Asur, not on account of suffix. No, on account of Vale, because in their minds, Cherem is a reference to Cherem of Beis HaMikdash. But otherwise, if there was another option on the table, it's a suffix, you would go lekula. So actually, the Ran explains that, Rabbi Yehuda did not have to reference Truma to bring out his shita as opposed to Cherem, and Rabbi Lezer Tzaddik, reference Cherem as opposed to Truma. They could have discussed either case. Because ultimately, it's all about how do we treat a suffix. Right? So according to Rabbi Yehuda, a Stam Truma in Yehuda is Asr, and Stam Truma in Stam Cherem in Yehuda is Asr as well, because it lends to two interpretations. Whereas according to Rabbi Tzaddik, Stam Truma in Yehuda is mutter, even though it lends to two interpretations. We go suffix l'kula, and Stam Cherem in Yehuda is mutter as well because it lends to two interpretations. So why did he, refer to Truma and here to Cherem? He says it just happens to be that's how they accepted their halacha from their Rebbe. But ultimately, it's all based on the same question. When it's Vade one way, we know the halacha. When it's a suffix, Rabbi Yehuda says l'chumra, and Rabbi Yehuda says the kula. So in summary, Stam Lashon Truma. In Yehuda, it's Asr according to Rabbi Yehuda because it can be a reference to either Davar Hanadar or not. Either Trumas Halishka or Trumas Gerin, so it's Asr. Whereas according to Elizabeth Tzaddik, it's Mutter. It's only a suffix. Suffix is the kula. In Galil, all agree, Stam Truma is Mutter. Because there's no reference there to Trumas Halishka. In Galil, Truma means Trumas Goyren, which is not a Davar another. What about Stam Cherem? So in the Yehuda area, it can be either a reference to the Cherem of Beis HaMikdash or Cherem Kohanim. Therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's Asr. Stam is Asr. According to Elazar Tzaddik, since it's only a suffix, we go L'kula, it's Mutter. But in Galil, all agree, Stam Cherem is Asr. Why? Because in Galil, certainly, it's not a reference to Cherem of Kohanim. They're not familiar with that concept. So according to all Shittas, even according to letter of Tzaddik, it would be Asr, and certainly even according to Rabbi Yehuda, even if it's only a straight suffix, it would be Asr as well. All the best to you and Hatzlacha Rabbah.